Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Resident Evil 0. In the last part we brought some items forward from the main training facility and did a lot of our stuff we have to do here in the lab, and now we're going to go and finish this area off and head towards the actual endgame area. Like I said, this area isn't exactly very long, but it has a lot of interesting things in it. It's about the equivalent of like the hospital in Resi 3, the sewers in Resi 2, blah blah blah, that sort of area. So, towards the end of the last part, we got the breeding room key for Rebecca, and that allows us to access the breeding room right here. Might as well throw away the key too, because again, there's never really a reason to keep them. I'm waiting for the game where they're like, hey, yeah, you get an achievement if you keep them all somehow. Just make sure when you come in here, you have some sort of high-powered weapon, be it the shotgun if you have it on her, or in my case, I like to give her the grenade launcher with the acid rounds, because in here, there are 2 hunters waiting for you right around this corner. With that said, there's a very good reason there was acid rounds in the room we first found hunters back in the facility basement. By and large, as long as you, I think, directly on them, a single acid round will kill a single hunter. There might be times where maybe if you hit them like in the arm, it technically won't kill them instantly, maybe, but a single shot's all you need. Just make sure you don't accidentally double tap, because hunters do, I think, have the longest death animation in the game, barring maybe Mimicry Marcus's, and they flail around a bit and cry out, and you might think they're still alive if they do that. Before we get the key item in here, let's actually take a look at this note. BOW report. Research to date has shown that when the progenitor virus is administered to living organisms, violent cellular changes cause a breakdown in the system. Furthermore, no satisfactory method has been found to control the organisms for use as weapons. Clearly, greater coordination at the cellular level is essential to enable further growth. I conducted a number of experiments in an effort to find a breakthrough. This is my report. Insecta. Perhaps because these ancient animals have been genetically stable for millennia, when administered with the progenitor virus, they exhibited only explosive, high-energy growth and increased aggressiveness. It is extremely difficult to envision them as a BOW. Amphibia. Injecting a frog with the virus resulted in an increase in leaping power and abnormal tongue growth. However, no change in mental ability was observed. Furthermore, an abnormal appetite resulted in the test subject randomly attacking all moving objects. Usefulness for BOW is limited. Mammalia. The progenitor virus was merged with monkey's cellular DNA, resulting in increased fertility. The resulting young exhibited improved aggressiveness and somewhat increased mental capacity. As a side effect, visual power was lost, but this was offset by an improvement in hearing ability. However, they were unsatisfactory as weapons. It does seem that no progress can be made without making humans the base organism. Which I guess actually that explains potentially why, Eliminators actually don't infect Rebecca when they attack her. They're technically not infected with the T virus. They just have the progenitor in their DNA. So, it's hard to tell. But there is a key item here. It's just below the corpse of the hunter that I hit with the acid round. So I need to just kind of feel around for it. It's also a very small item, so if anything's hiding the item, it's actually very hard to see. You could theoretically, though, just leave the area and re-enter to despawn the hunter corpses. But in here, we got a dial. We need to now send this dial down to Billy so he can use it to fulfill a puzzle on his end. And this will be the last time we really need to send an item between the characters from memory. At least in this area. So let's do some quick speed up to get that over to him, because we've seen this trip already. You know the level design around here by now if you're playing along. The lab is a very small area, as I've said a couple times already. Now, the dial itself, we haven't investigated what I need to use this on, but we've passed by it already. There's another door in the hallway the Mimicry Marcus was hiding in that we haven't investigated yet. So let's take it over to that. It's also directly right next to the red chemical canister for Rebecca if you left her down here. There's a device for entering a combination, but it's missing a part and can't be used. So let's place it on in, and then we have to figure out what the combination is, which thankfully is pretty quick to find out, because we technically already have all the hints for it. We're not going to enter a combination directly, though. We want to re-enter our files to find the combination. In a file we found last time, the leech growth records, you may have noticed some numbers are differently colored. 4, double, 2, half. So, the 4 digits of the combination are based on those. It starts with 4, we then double it to 8. They then lost 2, so the next number after that is 6, and then the numbers get cut in half again to 3. So, 4, 8, 6, 3 is the combination for this lock universally. It never changes from this. Though again, if this game ever gets a remake, I wouldn't mind if it had the New Game Plus item shop that 3 remake had. So you could just get this dial by default and come over here and immediately know the combination for this and potentially skip this entire area if you play your cards right. I think that'd be funny, because I like when games let me do stuff like that. And we've technically been in the room we're entering right now already. We entered it as Rebecca a moment ago on the floor above us.
Maybe I could use this.
Rebecca here, over.
Billy, I found something here that might make you happy. It's an aerial cable car.
Really? That's great. Now we can get out.
Yep, let's regroup as soon as possible. Over.
Roger.
Notably, there is a completely different version of that cutscene if you leave Rebecca down here and send Billy up to the second floor. There's a couple times the game does that, like notably there's a version of the cutscene where Billy plays the piano earlier where Rebecca plays it, but that doesn't solve the puzzle at all. There's a lever here. Pull it? Yes. So that moves that ladder over there, which now means we can have Rebecca enter this room on her end and actually reunite with Billy. Because I don't think there's a way for you to jump down through any of the things that you use the hookshot to get up to. But we also want to come over here and grab the output regulator coil to match with the input regulator coil we found earlier as Billy. We need both those items in order to actually leave this area for good. So, let's swap back over to Rebecca and have her move all the way this way herself. Mind you, there's one step we want to do before we actually get into the room with Billy. Because when she gets to the room with Billy, we're going to want her to climb down that ladder, but we're going to need a certain item in that room as it is. And thankfully I dropped it nearby because, well, you're universally going to have dropped it nearby because of how small the laboratory is. We need the hookshot one more time. The last time we needed it in the game. Kind of ridiculous this item has survived from the train all the way to here. 7 parts later, effectively, but it's the hookshot's probably the worst example of item usage in the game to me, let alone probably even the series, because of just how often it comes back up, despite the fact it seems like you should probably be done with it after maybe the second use, if even. I think it's the shining example of why I really dislike the placing the items on the ground system instead of the item box, for this game in specific at least. Honestly, there are probably some other Resident Evils that could use this system in that would feel a lot better even if they didn't change how the items were, because there's not many times you need to use the same key item in different locations spanning most of the campaign, if not both discs. At the least, after the first backtrack for it, if you left it all the way where the Ecliptic Express crashed, it's universally going to be close by after the second usage of it because we're still so close to the church in terms of just pure room count, but still, not a fan. So the reason we need the hookshot again is that once we climb down this ladder as Rebecca, or Billy in the case you brought him up here, we still need to get into and turn on the cable car right here. And the office to do that is upstairs, but the door into it is locked.
Okay.
However, through the windows, if you look carefully, and even if you wander around down here, there's another hole we can climb up with the hookshot. So we're just going to exchange all the coils to her because she's going to need them up there. And then we can send her up there to turn this entire situation on, and we can get going on to the next area. There we are. And once you use the hookshot to get up here, you can drop the hookshot. You're never going to need it again. Although I've always joked to myself about being so stubborn about the hookshot at this point that I should keep it with me the rest of the campaign just to limit my inventory slots, but you really shouldn't actually do that. The door is now unlocked, so we can now go to and from in this room. No problem. In fact, I think it's technically considered the same room now, I want to say. Yeah, it is. They do that a couple times in the game, between this and Remake even, where you'll just connect 2 rooms as one, and it's no longer needing a loading screen. I actually like that they do that a lot. I feel like if they did remakes of 2 and 3 in Code Veronica in this style, they probably would do that, and even a couple of places there. Over here, though, is where we need to use the coils, so use them and power up the cable car. Now, if you're very familiar with a lot of visuals from classic Resident Evil, you probably just thought that looked familiar. Keep that in mind. Before we head down to Billy, though, I do want to try and grab all the items of note around here, namely the shotgun shells. There's a gas canister over here, which, hey, I might be able to make more Molotovs with that down the line. There's still a few Mimicry Marcuses left. And the green herb. The hookshot, though, can stay there. Rotten hell. Can't wait for the remake where you can potentially also use it as a weapon in some form, and there's an achievement for carrying it with you the entire campaign and never dropping it. Because that seems like something modern Capcom would do with Resident Evil achievements. Things that I really think are too overkill for me to go for with any regularity. Yeah, it's weird. As much as I really like platinuming and getting 100% in a lot of other games, I have never done that in full for Resident Evil, because something about it just bounces off my brain. I can't quite parse why. I think especially with the classic games, it's just the level of perfection they want you to do to get, like, high ranks and all that jazz. And it just isn't fun to me. With that, we're just about ready to get onto the cable car. There are a couple of quick inventory things I want to do. For one thing, with the inventory I already have here, I want to give whatever grenade rounds I have on Billy to Rebecca, as well as give her back her handgun. But also, I'm once again going to go back to the reference room where Billy spent most of the time here in the lab, and get all the items I ferried over to there from the main hall over to here, so I can then ferry them into the cable car from there. Again, you largely don't need to do this unless there's some healing items you don't want to leave behind, like first aid sprays or red and green herbs. If there's certain ammos you don't really feel like you're going to need, like standard grenade rounds, don't worry about going back to get them. This is just my own inventory issuing that is causing problems like this. You should definitely bring the Magnum ammo with you, though. That's the one thing you should definitely bring. In case you're wondering where the Magnum is at this point, because we've been getting ammo for it for a while, it's relatively soon, and we have a good stock up of ammo for it, but I'm still basically going to save it for boss fights exclusively when we do get it. It is one thing after another in that cutscene, and I find it oddly funny because of it. We lose Billy to a monkey. There's a Mimicry Marcus here, and then the power goes out. I actually killed this Mimicry Marcus in 2 napalm rounds, which I think is indicative of their slightly varying HP that enemies have in this series. Not a big waste because I have Molotovs for the few that remain in the game on top of anything else, but at the same time, I got other priorities. So at this point, since there's no power coming to here, we need to go back up there and restore power. Always felt this was kind of an unneeded extra step, but I guess it's to guarantee that you potentially fight that Mimicry Marcus because you can't just enter the cable car. I do find what's up here kind of funny, though. Because as we go into the little office where we turned on the power, you might start hearing something, a slight wriggling even. Because there's just some leeches in here, and they somehow took the... I think that's the output regulator coil out of the system, which means to me that Mimicry Marcus probably picked that shit up and was like, nah, not in my house, and then just went down to try and kill us. I don't know why. I think that's just a very funny image. Either way, replace the item and power is restored, no problem. Kind of a weird extra step, but oh well. And thus I can begin my process of once again ferrying all my inventory forward into the cable car so we can take it into the next area. Honestly, I think what could maybe even help with a remake of this to make it better with inventory management is if they just do what they did with 8 and 4 remake and give us a version of the attaché case. Not even to like the same extent as 4 and 8, just a version of it to store more than 6 items. I think that could go a long way and keep the dropping items on the ground mechanic interesting. Mind you, I don't know how they would do inventory upgrades unless they just did the thing from 2 and 3 remake, which also I guess that system could work well in this game if they remake it in that type of style. So a very minor inventory management thing I believe I did do here is that I made sure the shotgun and shotgun shells were on Billy when he fell. So he took those items with him. So I don't need to worry about ferrying those forward. It's just all these herbs and ammo pieces I still need to bring with me. And it's important you do that because in this very cable car is our Magnum. Absurdly powerful weapon, low ammo. Save it for the rare mimicry markets you're going to run into moving forward, or the final boss exclusively, honestly. It can insta-kill basically any normal zombie along the way, but that's kind of a waste of ammo in my eyes. Actually thinking about it, 2 other fights you could use that ammo on, but I would still recommend saving at least half of whatever ammo you have for it for the final boss. Just as a just-in-case kind of deal. So even though we just got the Magnum, I am immediately dropping it and ferrying some of the items out of the cable car because it's just going to be better to have them in an area that's not in here. Again, a lot of this part of the game is me doing this, and it does artificially extend the game's length. That's my own issue. And it's largely because I play so counter to how this game wants me to play, largely in these games. At the same time, though, I am willing to bet most people on their first playthrough play exactly like this because they don't know what's coming up. It's really the super experts with the series that can play this game in a way that's just kind of beautiful. I remember watching, I think, Carcinogen's No Damage run of this at some point. It's a beauty to watch, especially because they're playing the HD remaster, which will run higher than 30 frames a second, which doesn't matter a lot for this game, but there's the occasional visual thing that it helps with. If you have a keen eye, you're probably noticing they're giving us a lot of healing items all of a sudden. There's a couple of good reasons for that, because for one thing, we're now past the super wide-range wandering section where you're probably going to be dying a lot and trying to optimize where you're going with your items and deaths. So they're not worrying about spreading them out as much anymore. But also, we're coming up on some pretty dangerous stuff overall, so they're probably just prepping you more than anything. Going back to the game's super key staff, though. After Kamiya in the original game design role, the production manager for the game was Takeshi Taniguchi, who is largely a planner across the various projects they've worked on: Power Stone 2, Capcom vs. SNK, Onimusha 1, Capcom vs. SNK 2, Resi 0, Oogie's Revenge, all that jazz. Their most recent credits that aren't just reports of things like this or Onimusha 1 is Resident Evil Revelations 2 as one of the managers. So they've been with the series by and large a lot of their time at Capcom. So if you thought the cable car and the cutscene attached to it looked familiar, you're especially gonna think this room and the room in that door look familiar, and there's good reason for that. But that said, we're gonna do some more speed up here because I ferried the items from the previous room over to here now, and I probably should have just ferried them to here in the first place. The next role in the credits to talk about are the coordinators, who are Hidenori Fukukawa and Yodo Liu. They both have very few projects under their name in direct credit roles on Moby Games, at least. This is Yodo Liu's only credit, and Fukukawa also worked on a soccer RPG on the Sega Saturn. More interesting are the scenario editors. The entirety of Flagship is listed as a company here, but there's also 3 other people listed. Noboru Sugimura, who was a scenario writer for a lot of things like the original Resi 2, Survivor, Dino Crisis 2, Clock Tower 3, Onimusha 1 through 3, Haunting Ground, things like that. Hiromichi Nakamoto, who worked on this, Clock Tower 3, and Dino Crisis 3 as scenario stuff. And Junichi Miyashita, who worked on Code Veronica X, this, and Dead Aim. So if you're thinking this is all looking familiar at this point, you're very correct to do so. I'll talk more about that in specific, but over here in a very familiar room, there's a key item we need to grab, but also something's being displayed. A giant humanoid being is suspended in bioorganic fluid inside a capsule. That looks a little familiar now, doesn't it? Over here in this familiar room, we got ourselves a key which we need to use in another room around here. Beware the jump scare. There are 2 hunters in here, but I don't recommend using your acid rounds on them. Use whatever grenade or fire rounds you have on them, as your acid rounds are going to have a better use coming up in the relatively near future. You could theoretically just try to run around the second hunter, especially if it's slow about rounding the corner, or if you can outwit its jumps. Really, how you take this room depends on what health you're at to begin with, because if you're lower on health, you probably are going to want to be afraid of the jumps the hunters could do at you. In the meanwhile, as we climb back up, next up in the main credits, the executive advisor is series creator Shinji Mikami, who has also worked on Dino Crisis, a lot of the early producing stuff on Ace Attorney, Evil Within, Hi-Fi Rush, Ghostwire Tokyo. You know Mikami if you know this series. Afterwards, in the credits after them, in the promotional producer spot is Hiroyuki Kobayashi, who was a programmer for enemies and player stuff in Resident Evil 1. They did some programming for Resident Evil 2 and Dino Crisis as well, but by the time of the GameCube and PS2, they started being a producer on a lot of things. They've been a producer on Devil May Cry since the start, even, to the point where they're credited as Devil May Cry series in the Project Cross Zone games. Their most recent credits overall are things like executive producer Mega Man 11, as well as the technical support for the Tales of Arise DLC, weirdly. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 11, we're going to go through some kind of familiar territory before heading off towards the true endgame area. See you guys then.